I'm so glad he's here. You know, my voice in Washington, D.C. is Jim Jordan, Louis Gohmert, Tom Massey. I'm sorry, it's really not Tom Reed. I would not have a voice in Albany in the Senate if I didn't have George Borrello. He's my voice, and he has a record to prove it. And he may tell you about the award he received. If he doesn't tell you, I will. But George, come on up. We'll have him share. We have questions here. We'll get to the questions again. If you have your question, hand them to Carl, Cheryl, or Linda.
Mel, thank you very much. Well, good evening, everybody. You know what? It's really great to be back with you all. You know, I've been coming to these meetings for a long time, and you know, it's good to see more and more people showing up because, you know, all it takes for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We all know that, right? So we're all here because we're not going to just do nothing. That's right. And, you know, I can tell you this much. I don't know if all you know my background. You know, I'm a business person, private sector. I stepped up to do this job because I want to make a difference. I want to make a change. Quite frankly, I had a lot less work and a lot more money when I was working in the private sector than I do now. But I want to be here because it's critically important. We are watching our democracy, our freedom, slip through our fingers right now. Yes. You know, and what does Saul Alinsky say in Rules for Radicals? Never let a crisis go to waste. This is a perfect example of that. This pandemic has been politicized and has been used to gain control. And those people that are willing to give up their freedoms in exchange for the false narrative that they're somehow being protected are letting it happen to them. It's so wrong. You know, we have our brave frontline workers, the people you heard from tonight, the ones that they called heroes and they clapped for and all that. Now we're telling, you know what? Get the vaccine or get out. How wrong is that? I mean, we're saying to children that went to school without masks on, especially 2-year-olds, toddlers, and all of a sudden we're going to flip a switch? I mean, it's wrong. And here's the part that I really like the most. What do liberals love to say? What's their big, when it comes to situations, what do they say? My body, my choice. Hypocrites. Hypocrites. This is not about compassion. This is not about public health. This is about control. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind. This is about control. They can't win at the ballot box. They can't win by trying to build consensus and be true leaders. They have to do it by turning the screws, by rigging the system, by ensuring that our voices are not heard. But they can't keep us all down, folks. Right. That's what we're here to talk about. That's why everyone is here. You know, I took a lot of hits recently because I filed a lawsuit against our new governor. You know, I had such high hopes, and the honeymoon lasted about 5 minutes. So, you know, because she is a Western New Yorker, folks, she understands. You know, she should know better. I really wanted to try and work with her because, let's face it, after dealing with Governor Cuomo, you know, trying to negotiate with Satan himself would have been a hell of a lot easier than negotiating with Cuomo. But really, you know, she should understand what the impact of what this is on our freedom. She should certainly understand what it's doing to our economy. You know, to the fact that we have people that are at odds with each other, neighbors, friends, and family. We've turned people against each other. What's the whole idea behind socialism? It's the oppressor versus the oppressed. Okay? They want to turn us on each other. We're all Americans. We all bleed red, but they want to turn us into little groups. And this whole idea of tribalism and keeping people separated. That's the agenda, folks. How do you destroy the United States of America, the most powerful nation on earth, the most powerful nation ever in the history, the greatest nation ever in the history of this world? You do it by destroying us from within. And that is the agenda. You know, that's not a popular thing to say right now, but it's the truth. This is what they are trying to do to us. They are trying to tear us apart from within. And they're doing a good job because they hit on real sensitive subjects, right? Things we don't like to talk about, things we're not comfortable with. But that's exactly the agenda. And there are folks out there that I think truly believe in their heart that what they're doing is right, but they don't realize they're being manipulated. They're being manipulated by people that have an agenda to destroy capitalism and to tear down the United States of America. And we're not going to let that happen. Because we are the empire state, right? Yeah, that's the great empire state. Of course, you know, with Cuomo, it was the evil empire. And let me tell you something. I am certainly frustrated with what's going on right now, but I am damn glad to be rid of Andrew Cuomo. That's for damn sure. But I think the tide is turning, folks. I really do believe that. Okay. With all the things that we've seen, defund the police, the bail reform, the idea of turning our police officers into the bad guys, and the criminals into the heroes, all that stuff that's been going on, people are finally reaching their breaking point. Even in New York City, I will tell you that. I have hope. You know, we had all these people running in the Democratic primary for the New York City mayor, all these socialists and Marxists and everything else, and you know who won? An ex-police officer who rejects defund the police. Because you know what? It's nice that when you're living in your high-rise on the Upper East Side, living off your trust fund, it's great to talk about climate change and social equity, but when you can't feel safe walking out your front door, things start to change. And the number one concern for the people in New York City right now isn't climate change, it's not social equity, it's crime. That's right. This is the message we have to send to the rest of New York. This is happening all over. Rochester is now per capita more dangerous than Chicago. It's true. Okay, we have a more expensive state, a more violent state, and it happened in an awful quick time because we have one-party rule in Albany. Everything, all the crazy stuff that the liberal Democrats promised for decades, all of a sudden came true in just 2 years. The brakes are off. The inmates are running the asylum. Call it what you want, but that's what we have in Albany right now. We have a system with no checks and balances. There's no more firewall. So people say, what can we do? You know, let me tell you something. We all belong to organizations in the state. You might belong to a union. You might belong to some kind of trade organization. Find out who those people are supporting, okay? I talk to folks in real estate. Anybody here in real estate? Anybody know anybody here in real estate? In real estate? You should find out who the New York State Board of Realtors is supporting politically. They spend a lot of money on people that do things very damaging to our economy and to our property values, to our quality of life. You know, everyone belongs to some kind of an organization. Find out who your organization is supporting, who they're writing checks to, because that is the path. The path is, you know, look, here in our area, you've got good representation, I believe. I do say so myself. But we got to change it across the state, and we all have friends and family in other parts of the state. You know, there are this proliferation of these industrial wind turbines and solar panels, and that's all okay. We got to get the other representatives in upstate New York and western New York on record. Where do they stand on these things? And we got to hold their feet to the fire, because they love to say the right things when they're standing in front of a camera or when they're tweeting or other social media. But in Albany, that's not how they're voting. They're in lockstep with the socialists out of New York City that tell them how to vote. So we got to get folks in upstate New York, western New York. We can turn this around. You know, people say, oh, what can we do? There's 8 million people in New York City. What can we do? There's 20 million people in the state of New York. That means we outnumber them 1.5 times over. If we stay together and if we motivate those folks and they open their eyes to what's really going on, we can turn things around here in New York State. It's not hopeless. Okay, I could pretty much have lived anywhere I wanted. I choose to live here. My family's here. I love it here. I love our area. I love all the things that we have. I don't want to leave. They can leave. This is a great area. This can be the Empire State once again.
Amen. Yeah.
So with that, I'm going to just say that we're fighting hard every day in Albany. We take stands on things, sometimes if you got to stand alone. Back when, in March 3rd of 2020, at the very beginning of all this, I had just taken office as your state senator. I had been, 2 months basically in Albany, and they called us into a special session one night. And they laid this bill in front of us, and in about 45 minutes we had to vote on it. And it was a COVID relief bill. This is how we're going to battle COVID. $41 million to battle COVID. Along with it was a whole list of emergency authority that was going to be granted to Andrew Cuomo. Authority like no other governor has ever had anywhere in America. And that night there was a lot of pressure. They said, look, this is about the money to fight COVID, and you have to support this. But I looked at it and I said, look, I would never, back when I was county executive, would I ever wanted our legislature to hand this kind of unfettered power to me? No. I wouldn't expect them to. I certainly don't want to be here as a member of the state legislature and hand this kind of a power to anyone, let alone to Andrew Cuomo. So that night I was one of only 4 senators that voted against that bill. And boy, how right was I after seeing it. Look at what he did in such a short period of time. Look at the damage that he caused. And you know what, folks? He was a bad guy to begin with, but as they all say, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And we're seeing that now, unfortunately, with our new governor. She's gone in a very short period of time down the same road. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. And unfortunately, I hate to say that because, you know what, I had hope that we could work together on some things. She's not, she's the first time we had somebody from upstate New York in like a century. But we need to speak up. We need to tell her, you got to return to your roots. She's our governor now for at least the next, what are we talking, 15, 16 months, year and a half, okay? Yeah. We want her to recognize that, remember where you came from, Governor. Remember why it is that you are where you are, okay? Not just by happenstance, but the fact that, the people in Western New York did support you at one time. Now it's her turn to support us again. And that's the message we have to send to her. And we'll do it as nicely as we can, although I did sue her. So we did a lawsuit to push back against the mask mandate, and I believe that there's a few of them, but the one that I'm headed up is, I believe, will be October 8th, I believe, we're going to hear. So we'll see what happens. The bottom line is that, you know what, folks, we cannot continue to shred our Constitution, shred the separation of powers, allow this type of dictatorial action to happen because we're concerned about what's going on right now.
That's right.
Our legislature has been very comfortable just handing the reins of power over. In New York State, we went from being a representative democracy to a dictatorship overnight. And unfortunately, many of my colleagues were very comfortable in doing that. It was nice for them to, sit at home or in Florida and Zoom into a meeting and vote on things that really didn't matter because at the end the governor had all the power, right? So they became very comfortable with that. They're still very comfortable with that. I can tell you that, you know what, I take the job seriously. I showed up there. Between the Senate and the Assembly, there are 213 members, and on any given day in Albany this whole year, if I saw a dozen or two, it was a lot. I mean, they were literally not there, but you know what? Those of us that were dedicated to doing the job, we were there. Because, we're considered to be essential workers, too. I don't know what's essential about what we do, but it's nice to call yourself essential. But, at the end of the day, you got to be there to do the job, in my opinion. So, and you got to be there because you can't, in the Senate, you can't debate a bill unless you're there. So you can vote remotely, but you can't debate. Well, I'm proud to say that I was there to debate every bill. Every bad bill that they put forward, myself and a handful of my colleagues were there to debate those bills. We're not going to let them pass without pointing out the flaws, the errors, all the dangerous things that they've done, and the consequences that have come from those things, like bail reform. Like the whole idea that if you're age 55, you should automatically be eligible for a parole hearing just because you reached a certain age. I mean, I'm 54. I don't think that I'm going to be any less dangerous in a year from now just because I turned 55. But the whole idea, yeah, you're dangerous. Guilty. These are the kind of things that we just have to make sure our friends and neighbors understand is really going on here. It's the erosion of our freedom. It's the destruction of the separation of power. It's the idea that the people that don't want to stand up and speak up are willing to relinquish that power to other people. And that's the problem. We need to have a balance of power again. And we need it in Albany, and we certainly need it in Washington, that's for sure. There is no more balance of power. And we're seeing what's happening, how we've been hurtling out of control with one-party rule in Albany and Washington. It has to stop. And I'll finish with what I started with. All it takes for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. I know I'm bastardizing somebody else's quote, but that's what it is. And that's where we are right now. Talk to your friends and neighbors. Talk to the people that you know in other parts of the state and other parts of this country, and let them know that that those people that think, it doesn't really matter, it does matter. It doesn't matter who's in office. I don't really care who my representative is. It doesn't affect my daily life. It does. And you know what? People thought that all of a sudden, and now they can't walk out of their house, without somebody scrutinizing what they're doing and how they're doing it. So that happened really darn quick, didn't it? Yep. We went from being a representative republic to a dictatorship awfully quick, didn't we? Yeah. It's got to stop, folks. You got to let everybody else. We're all in on this. It's the only way we're going to get our country back. It's the only way we're going to get our state back. So I'm very proud to be a representative. And Mel, I know we have some questions, but I just want to say thank you all very much for being here. Thank you all for standing up for what's right.
Thank you.
As a pastor, I can't believe I forgot this, but Scott, we need you to take the collection to help with what we try to do. So if Scott has something ready to go, he'll pass the can or whatever, a hat. We'll try to get that job done. And wait a minute, before we go any farther, George, you've got something over the summer. It was an award. Yeah. What award was that?
Thank you. I was given the award, and again, this is 2020 was my first year as a senator, and I received from the Conservative Party award for having the most conservative voting record in the New York State Senate.
So we've got them, and we need to keep them. All right. Here are some questions. Again, if you have a question, bring them up front. There's a lot of them. George, we are hearing that parents with children in school have to have shots in order to enter the school for any reason. Why are we hearing that?
Well, I think this. Let me say this. One of the things that I have said, in the lawsuit that we, the lawsuit we brought forward with the mask mandate, is that this whole idea that not following the process is a problem. It's very technical, but essentially they circumvented the rules without declaring a state of emergency, without even declaring the emergency regulation Department of Health. They didn't follow any of their own rules. Why am I bringing it up in response to this question? It's because had they followed the rules, we would have a clear understanding of what they actually wanted. I don't know why you're hearing that, because this knee-jerk reaction, the governor, the Department of Health, they put this edict out without having any of the details, right? Like, for example, New York State and the New York State Constitution specifically states that the state has an obligation to educate our children. So if you aren't going to send your child to school because they're not wearing a mask or they're not vaccinated, what's your plan, Governor, to educate those children? Because you have a constitutional obligation to still ensure that they're educated. And the answer is there is no plan. So why you're hearing that, I don't know, but it speaks to the fact that they did this so haphazardly, I'll say it nicely, and they didn't follow the rules, that we can't answer questions like that.
It is not right that people cannot collect unemployment when jobs were lost due to the vaccine mandates. We are the ones who worked through the pandemic.
That's right.
What are your plans to help us? Will you fight for emergency funding?
Yeah.
The answer is yes, I will. But here's the thing that really aggravates me and disgusts me about this. My wife and I are business owners, okay? In New York State, right now, as we speak, I don't know a single business owner that isn't desperate to hire workers right now. Yet we are at the bottom of the list of all the states with our unemployment rate, 7.4%, a recession level. What does that tell you? That means that lots of people are collecting unemployment who probably shouldn't be, right?
Right.
There was no attestation self-attestation, basically. Basically, if you just said, yeah, I can't work because whatever.
I'm afraid.
Yeah, yes, I have a fear of catching COVID, or whatever the reason is. You can give any reason you want, literally, and you can collect unemployment. And that's what happened in New York State. That's why we've had the worst unemployment rate for the last 18 months, because we allowed literally anyone for any reason to collect unemployment. And now we're saying to our frontline workers, the ones who worked through this pandemic, through all of the uncertainty, you can't collect unemployment. It's ridiculous, it's outrageous, and it is absolutely an insult to the people that we relied on for so long. It's got to change. We're fighting back against that, absolutely.
Okay, is there or are there moderate Democrats that we should contact in Albany that you feel might not follow the extreme leftist agenda?
Well, here's how it works, folks. I'm going to give you a little insider tip here. So, there are moderate Democrats there. The problem is that they have a target on their back every day.
Yeah.
And, Cuomo did this for a long time. The reason that we have the situation we have in Albany is because Andrew Cuomo put a target on the back of everybody that disagreed with him. And they were moderate Democrats. We even had, before I was in there, they had something called the IDC, the Independent Democratic Conference, that caucused with the Republicans. And that's actually how the Republicans kept the majority. And they were systematically taken out. And what they did was, in Democratic primaries, Cuomo and his allies dumped a ton of money on these radical socialists. And they are now elected officials. So, are they there? Yes. Are they scared? Yes. And that's the problem. But they should also be scared that they're going to lose in the general election. And they should be concerned that continuing to follow lockstep is going to be a problem for them. But here's the reality. The Republican conference, this year alone, 42 times we introduced a resolution to strip Governor Cuomo of his executive authority. 42 times. And 42 times, every single Democrat voted no. So are the moderates there? Yes. But are they voting as they're being told to? Unfortunately, the answer is yes. So I think we should try. There's some good people there. But the bottom line is they need to have the confidence that they aren't going to be taken out. And that's the challenge. But we'll continue to try.
Could you name 1, 2, or 3?
I'm not going to call out my colleagues specifically because, quite frankly, that might get them in more trouble.
All right. Are you pleased with, and how can an individual citizen deal with the redistricting committee? That is, our congressional district is being reconfigured. Are you pleased with it?
No. So, we had a real opportunity here in New York State for the first time ever. Back in 2014, the people of New York, the voters, voted and said we want an independent redistricting commission. We want to take it out of the hands of these backdoor politicians behind closed doors, gerrymandering things just to preserve their own incumbency and their own power. And the people of New York overwhelmingly voted to create this independent redistricting commission. Now, fast forward, and the Democrats take over the Senate, and now they have the control of the Senate and the Assembly. And once that happened, they were on a mission to undermine the Independent Redistricting Commission. And essentially what has happened is that their task, the Independent Redistricting Commission's task, was to create one set of maps, a compromise, with people that were not sitting politicians, sitting elected officials. They were appointed by Democrats and Republicans, but in equal amount. And unfortunately, they couldn't come to any agreement. I think that was done on purpose. The Democratic Party, particularly in the Senate, has been trying to undermine this process for a while. They did not release funding for a long time for the Independent Redistricting Commission. They dragged their feet on a lot of the process, and they didn't give much runway to get off the ground and get this process done. So they set them up for failure. And what we ended up with was what we always had in the past: 2 maps, the Republican maps and the Democrats maps. And the problem with that is that if they create enough of uncertainty, if you will, then it's going to revert back to the legislature. And the Democrats are going to, because they control both houses, they're going to say we're going to draw the maps because they couldn't come to an agreement. So what can you do? Well, I will say we had a good turnout of folks to speak to the fact that, for example, we wanted to keep this, our congressional district, the southern tier congressional district, intact. It was a great district. 11 counties, and there wasn't one major dominant urban area that would, kind of suck up all the attention. We had 11 counties, all these 800,000 people, and everybody was pretty much equal. That is a good district, and we wanted to keep it that way. So what you can do is there's still going to be more hearings. We're probably not going to get the final maps until January. There will be opportunities in those hearings to speak up, to write letters, call leadership and tell them we need to keep this district intact. It's important for us. We don't want to be lumped in. I mean, you know what? I remember the days when Brian Higgins was our member of Congress. Yeah, that guy couldn't find Chautauqua County with a map and a Sherpa. I mean, it was so I don't want to go back to those days of being, ignored by a representative. You may not like Tom Reed, but he was our representative. He did speak for us, and that's he did do that job the way it was supposed to be done. He did represent us much better than Brian Higgins ever could have. Okay, and we don't want to go back to those days. So speak up, speak out, and just remember that, folks. The whole idea is the more that they can do behind closed doors, the more they can do out of sight of the average person, the easier for them to get away with those things. Democracy dies in darkness, and they are constantly in the darkness. They want to be there. That's what they do.
It's kind of a follow-up to that. Do you support an election audit for New York? If yes, how would you accomplish it? And what can we do in New York to require ID for all future elections?
Yeah, so... So I actually have a package of bills, an election integrity bill that I sponsored that would do a number of things, including require an ID to vote in New York State. That is absolutely important. Here's the bottom line. People have to have confidence that our elections are fair and that their vote counts. And that there isn't something else going on. You look at some of the other things that have happened across this nation. You had, during the BLM riots across this country, the narrative was, the police, there's so much corruption in our police department. The data never supported that, but yet the answer was, it doesn't matter if it's true or not, we need to do something about it so people have confidence again in our law enforcement. Well, doesn't that same logic apply to our elections? Don't you want people to have confidence? Okay, this is the foundation of our democracy. It's the cornerstone of our representative democracy, our republic. People have to have confidence that our elections are fair and free. If they don't, we're headed on a very dangerous road. So I support anything that'll restore people's confidence that our election process is legitimate, it's not rigged, and that people can go and cast their vote and know that it will count. And that's the most important part of it. People say the most important thing is to make sure everybody votes. Everybody vote. That's not the most important thing. The most important thing is to ensure the integrity of our elections. Period.
Yay! What is your advice for college students in the SUNY system? Is there any hope that those who have been removed due to the vaccine mandate will be able to return?
This is obviously a difficult situation. I disagree with the vaccine mandate for college students, for anyone. I mean, period. I disagree with the vaccine mandate for anybody, okay? It's not about the vaccine, it's about the mandate, and it's about the government overreach, period. But you know what, folks? The only way that we're really going to have an impact is when they feel it in their wallet, and I mean the people at SUNY. If enough people don't send their kids there, then they're going to have a problem, aren't they? I mean, at some point, and we can continue to pour millions and billions of dollars into the SUNY system, but at some point, if there's no students, what are they going to do? So, and that's the JCC, yeah. And I think that I think JCC does a great job, honestly. I have a lot of confidence because they're doing what we need for our workforce development. They're turning people out that are the skilled trades and applied sciences. I have a lot of faith because that's what we need here in this area, is to improve our workforce if we want to really keep our kids here. But as a SUNY system as a whole and how political it is, that's the concern, right? And it's being controlled out of Albany and New York City by people that are just political appointments. They're not, in a lot of cases, they're not even really people with a real deep knowledge of education. So that is a problem, and the only way I think we're going to be able to push back against that is if people. It's like anything else. If people aren't buying your product, you got to change, right? I mean, I'm a business person. If people aren't buying your product, if they're not going to your restaurant, then you got to change what you're doing. That's the only way we're probably going to. It's the kind of the free market in that sense. We have to make choices, better choices.
What is your take on Divide New York, and how will that relate to the mandates coming out of Albany currently?
Well, you may not know this, but I actually have a bill in the Senate to divide New York into 3 separate autonomous zones. I've had that early on in my career. I do think that is a path. I think there's we had a debate on this recently between there was 3 options, and my concern with with actually dividing New York into 2 separate states is it literally takes an act of Congress. But I think it would be great to have 3 autonomous zones. Our policy or our plan would be take Long Island and make that to 1 autonomous zone. The 5 boroughs of New York City. Although I don't think Staten Island would like that very much. I think they would like to leave. My friend Andy Lanza, who's the assistant minority leader, who's from Staten Island, says he's from Staten Island, the upstate of New York City. So I don't know if they would like that. And then the 3rd zone would be the rest of upstate New York. It's not a perfect plan, but let me say this. It's better than we have now. Mm-hmm. And the argument is you'll never survive without New York City's money. I don't agree with that because our government would look very different than what their government is. It would certainly be a lot less costly. Mm-hmm. It'd be a lot less regulation, mm-hmm. and it'd be a lot safer up here. That's for damn sure.
You wouldn't have the same welfare mandate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So So what is that?
Itself makes all the difference.
And with that, how many businesses would choose to leave New York City or the surrounding states, because they're all very expensive states, Connecticut, all these New England states, and move, just like right now our businesses leave New York to go down south. Imagine if we had a little oasis right here in upstate New York with less regulation, less taxes.
Yes.
I think people would move here.
Yes.
I think businesses would move here. So that to me is the best plan. It's the path of least resistance. And my bill calls for us to basically to do a study on this. And if they don't think these people in New York City are like, well, that'll never work. Well, give it a shot then. If you think it's not going to work, let us have a shot at this. So I think that they are concerned because we are the breadbasket of New York State up here, and I think there may be concern. So they're kind of arrogant about it. Well, you'll never survive without us. Even a lot of the folks around here, a lot of the liberals are like, oh, you'll never survive without New York City. Yeah, let us give it a shot. We'll tell you how it works out.
All right. Okay, is there an ongoing effort to return New York State to an accountable and reliable bail system?
Well, first of all, yes. The answer is yes. Let me tell you a couple things about the bail reform. It happened before I was in office, and the bail reform laws were horrible. You've taken bail away for 90% of the crimes, and the excuse is, well, we shouldn't have poor people sitting in jail because they simply can't afford bail. And is there some validity to that? Certainly. But when you take bail away for 90% of the crimes, I don't care how much money you have. If there's no bail, there's no bail. If a judge doesn't have discretion to hold someone who is a danger, a flight risk, then it doesn't matter if you've got 2 nickels rubbed together or you're a millionaire, you're not going to jail. And that's the system that we have now in New York State. And it's been a disaster. We saw an immediate spike in crime across New York State in every category almost. And so what did the Democrats do? Well, they quietly tweaked a few things, and they introduced legislation, and they changed some of the most egregious things, like, for example, no bail for someone who is sexually exploiting a child. No bail for that. No bail for someone who's laundering money for the purpose of supporting terrorism. No bail for that. And trust me, there's still some horrible things out there. So they knew that they screwed up, and they did make some changes because we pushed hard. I actually headed up a task force. We went around New York State and heard from the people that they never listened to. They never listened to the members of law enforcement, the people that deal with addiction issues, the people that that deal with parole violations, all these folks that they didn't listen to. They listened to one group of people, the people that believe that nobody should be in jail for any time for anything. That's all. That's the only radical special interest. They never talk to district attorneys. They never talk to law enforcement. They never talk to people that will tell you that sometimes going to prison, going to jail is the only place where somebody will get treatment for their addiction issues. And what happened? Now we see a spike in crime. We've seen a spike in overdose deaths. This is a bad system, folks. But there are people out there, unfortunately, these radical special interests, they write the legislation that passes. And they do it, because they, like I said, they don't think anybody should go to jail ever for any reason, and that we should abolish prisons. And that our police officers should be replaced with social workers, because that's a great idea. And that's who's writing the bills. And they, look at, if you want to be a responsible lawmaker, legislator, you hear from all sides. You sit down with all sides. You find out, what the best path is. And then you try to find something that's as much of a compromise as possible. They don't do that. That's not how they work. And the question is, how many special interests can we appease throughout the course of one particular legislative session? And that's their only goal. And quite frankly, folks, if we could have a year with no new laws passing, that'd be a great year for New York State, let me tell you something. You don't have to go to Albany and pass law. We passed, I can't remember how many hundreds of new laws this year alone.
Gridlock is good.
Yeah, it's I hate to say it, but you're right. There's just, the other thing too is, this is really what surprised me probably the most, although my expectations were low to begin with. About half of the legislation that we vote on are what are referred to as chapter amendments. What a chapter amendment is basically fixing a mistake you made. Half of the bills that we voted on were fixing mistakes they made previously because they so poorly thought out the legislation that they passed. And they passed it anyway. Then they go, oh, this is a mistake, and they bring it back around again. There are times where we have bills that are this thick, and we have a couple hours to read through it. We have an army of attorneys, literally, that have to go, we'll get a whole set of bills. They're up all night reading bills, giving us an analysis of what's going on. Then we sit there and do it ourselves because they want to pass these things as quickly as possible. Again, they don't want anybody knowing what's in those bills because at the end, they know that even though that they are appeasing the people they need to appease, they know it's not good for New York. Because if it was, they'd be nice and open. If this was really good for New York, they'd be nice and open about it. They all have nice names. They like to name the bills nice things, but in the end, there's a lot of damaging things in there that they don't want people to see. And that's why they do it the way they do it. And that's why they make a lot of mistakes.
Speaking of bills, this card says, I'm trying to understand the logic of your surplus food bill. The Republican Party has historically stood for small government and free markets. This bill seems to expand government and buy the overproduction of an industry which usually encourages more production. Can you help me understand how this bill fits with Republican, conservative, libertarian principles of free markets?
That's a good question. So they're talking about the Nourish New York bill. This is something that I championed, and I will tell you why. We saw in the pandemic how weak our food supply chain was. We had farmers that were dumping milk and letting their crops rot in the field. Meanwhile, we had grocery store shelves empty. We had food banks throughout this state that didn't have enough food for the people that were coming there, many of whom were, become food insecure for the first time. We're spending the money anyway, folks. That's the problem. We're spending the money. I understand that there is no free market in New York State. Okay, we're already bringing food in, and we're letting people, instead of giving them fresh fruits and vegetables from locally grown farmers to support our farmers, we're literally bringing in processed food from other states and other countries being paid for with taxpayer dollars. So what my bill says is, let's support our farmers with that money. Let's make sure that the food is safe, fresh, and local. Let's make sure that those folks that do need to have food provided to them are getting food that's being grown here in New York that supports our own farmers. I don't want somebody having, spam from shipped across the country. I want them to have the food that's grown here in New York that supports our farmers. Agriculture is the #1 industry in New York State. We should be supporting our farmers. We should be making sure that those crops don't end up rotting in the field, that milk is not dumped. That's the purpose of this bill. And I am proud to say that I had strong bipartisan support. It passed both houses unanimously. It's sitting on Governor Hulkel's desk. She still hasn't signed it. And you know what? On top of everything else, my bill was the first Republican bill to pass in the Senate this year.
This question takes reflection. When and how do we civilly disobey when there are fines threatened against us? Schools, mask mandates and such.
Well, Mel's going to write the check for the fine, so you're all good. Again, I think you have to say, let's just say, for example, with the mask mandate for children. If you don't send your children to school, you have a right to say, how are you going to educate my child? They can't fine you for that. If someone's going to say, look, from a business standpoint, it's easy, okay? I own restaurants. I could tell you that you can't come into my restaurant if you're not wearing a purple t-shirt. That's my prerogative. And if I lose all my business because you don't want to wear a purple t-shirt, that's on me. But when it comes to government, that's a different story. They have that obligation. You are taxpayers, you're citizens of this state, and quite frankly, we provide those same benefits to people that aren't citizens of the state or this country. So you should ask yourself, what can I do to ensure that they are providing their constitutional obligation to me? That they can't fine you for that. And to me, that's the best path I can think of.
I'm extremely concerned about children being mandated to take the vaccines. Don't administrators read the VAERS data? VAERS data.
No.
They seem ignorant. What can we do to prevent this catastrophe?
Well, again, I am against the mandates. If someone decides that they want to take the vaccine, that's up to them.
Amen.
For their child, that's up to them. And I'm not expecting any superintendent, administrator, or legislator to understand or try to understand the science or the sides. The bottom line is, it's not the role of government. Period.
Right.
So I think the answer is simple. We don't want that because that's not your role. This is the basis of my lawsuit. Okay, I don't want to get down in the weeds and argue on the science and whose science is right. The bottom line is, it's just not the role of government. If we keep it that simple, that's the answer. This is what we live in.
Yes. All right. The Chautauqua County Health Department carries a heavy sword. They are threatening and power-wielding and seem to relish their untouchableness. Who do they answer to? And what can be done to keep them in check? There seems to be no process for dealing with them. The penalties are real.
Well, in its purest form, the Department of Health reports to the county executive, and I was county executive. But I can tell you that they are, in the case of the Department of Health of Chautauqua County, they are also held by the mandates of New York State. County government really is the human shield for state government, quite frankly. They take all the stuff that they don't want to do themselves, and they make county government do it for them. I lived it for 10 years as a county legislator and county executive. That's the unfortunate role of county government. I can tell you that P.J. Wendell, our county executive, understands all the things I think that we understand here. He tries hard to make decisions, but when you're in an executive position, it's different than being in a legislative position. And I know because I've done them both. You have to have that balance, and you have to be able to make those day-to-day management decisions. But ultimately, the Department of Health in Chautauqua County, I believe, has got to answer to. I know that they have to answer ultimately to what the mandates that the state has put upon them, and that's really where. So if they don't do it, they will suffer also. So I don't think it's that, I really don't believe it's Department of Health in Chautauqua County that's trying to on their own do this. I think that they are unfortunately under the screws of our state government and our federal government when it comes to those mandates.
When do we stand up against that?
Well, I think the bottom line is that there's no doubt that we have to just gather more strength in people, and that's happening. And trust me, you can certainly speak with your county legislators, you can speak with the county executive, but ultimately it is the heavy hand of our state and federal government that has gotten us to where we are.
Okay, you've made a clear case against the farce of green energy in New York State. Why do you think Chautauqua County legislators have not put forth a no pilot for industrial solar resolution similar to the one limiting pilots for wind projects?
Yeah, and I think that's something that should be a discussion, ongoing discussion. I will tell you this, though. New York State, under Governor Andrew Cuomo, and continued under our current governor, has basically circumvented local control. So even if the legislature did do that, we have this new Office of Renewable Energy Siting, ORES. This was created by Andrew Cuomo to circumvent all local control, all local input, all local opposition. They can, if they feel that a project has been slowed down in any way by any kind of local opposition, including local ordinances, or even state ordinances, they can bypass DEC regulations on everything from habitat to drainage to. They can just say nope, none of that applies. It doesn't matter how many habitats you destroy, how much forest you tear down, how many things that it just doesn't matter. This has to happen because it's critically important. I don't understand the philosophy of we're going to somehow destroy our environment. That's how we're going to save the planet. But again, folks, this is not about climate change.
No.
It's about the governor, our previous governor, current governor, proving that somehow we're the most progressive state in the nation. What they are going to do isn't going to do a damn thing. It's not going to have an impact on carbon emissions and our carbon footprint. None of that. In fact, it's probably going to make things worse because ultimately you have to back up all this unreliable energy with good old-fashioned coal and gas, and instead of having it. Instead of converting the NRG plant in Dunkirk to natural gas, which would have drastically reduced the carbon footprint, instead we're running transmission lines to the dirtiest old-fashioned coal plants in places like Homer City, Pennsylvania. They are belching out more pollution to support this green energy boondoggle here in New York State. Okay, it's crony capitalism disguised as energy policy, and that's why I'm firmly against it, and will continue to be. But Albany is continuing to turn the thumb screws down on local control and local input, and that does include our county government as well.
How much federal funding does New York State, Chautauqua County, and townships get for enforcing mask and vaccine mandates that are killing businesses and putting citizens out of work?
Yeah, I'm not sure what kind of funding they get, but obviously the mandates, they're trying to force more and more mandates. You hear this from Biden, and you hear it from Kathy Hulkel that they're telling businesses they should be insisting on vaccinations for their customers, their employees. It's wrong, and it's creating. They're doing it in New York City. It's creating chaos. Okay, I'm in the restaurant business. Last thing I want is my 18-year-old hostess trying to be the vaccine police. I mean, that's ridiculous. And that's what's happened in New York City. They've had confrontations because you put these poor people. It's already hard enough to hire people in any industry, especially in the restaurant business, and you're going to have some poor young girl whose job it is to just seat people and then treat them. It's the hospitality business. You're supposed to treat people nicely. That's how you get people to come back. Turning them into vaccine Nazis isn't going to do that. So it's a bad business idea, and it's certainly not the way a business should run, and not how our government should try to make businesses run either. It's completely wrong.
What is your plan to stop Kathy Hulkel's plan to have foreigners take jobs of the unvaccinated?
This one really does disgust me on a number of levels, okay? And first of all, we've all these folks that have worked so hard throughout this pandemic, and we're now being told that either you get the vaccine or you're going to be fired. And then we're going to bring in, what's the plan? We're going to bring in, does she not realize that, first of all, that there is a healthcare worker shortage across this nation, especially nurses? We're going to bring in people from other states and other countries. Well, other states, you can forget about that because every other state needs especially nurses. So we're going to bring people from other countries. Yeah. Now, let me tell you something. I have been working to get a surgeon from Pennsylvania licensing in New York State for almost a year, for the better part of a year, so that they can go just from an experienced surgeon who's trying to move from Pennsylvania to New York, more than 9 months to get this licensing approved. The licensing is such a backup, it's so much red tape. New York State requires so much more than anybody else. But what's she going to do? She's going to bypass all that. So people from other countries or people fresh out of school can start going to work on human beings in New York State. That is the most egregious, arrogant, and stupid thing I think I've heard in a few weeks.
It has been proven that vaccinated people can catch COVID and infect others. However, as an employee of one of the largest manufacturing facilities in Chautauqua County, vaccinated employees are not required to test or quarantine. Why is that?
Again, I think it's because of the fact that they just haven't really thought this through. I mean, these are government regulations or government recommendations, and ultimately there is no consistency. Number one. Number two, it is truly. I think it's difficult for any employer to make these decisions. They're all worried about liability. One of the things that we did in Albany is that to appease the trial lawyers is we basically took away all the protections from companies. So now you can be sued. We passed a law this year. It's called the healthy environment law, healthy air. I can't remember exactly what it was. Ridiculous. That basically, as an employer, I'm completely responsible if you come in and say I caught any kind of an airborne illness whatsoever. Could be COVID, could be the flu. That I am financially liable for you catching that at my business. So the bottom line is we've already scared the hell out of all of our employers and our employees, and they just don't know what to do next. So I feel bad because I've experienced it. We passed a law in New York that basically if you catch any sort of an illness, and how can we even prove that you caught it at work, right? That because again, this is to appease the trial lawyers who are just licking their chops at the idea of suing everybody and anybody. And that's exactly what it is. And it's made it very, very difficult, even more difficult, for people to be able to navigate this whole idea of how do they handle these things in their workplace.
Whoops, sorry.
That's okay.
In addition to the lawsuit that you are engaged in to end these unconstitutional mandates, what else are you doing to affect people's ability to work and shop?
Well, I think there's a lot of ways we can do things. I've advocated on a number of levels for a lot of things, and including introducing legislation. I've supported good legislation, and I've opposed bad legislation. I fight every time I'm in Albany, every day, really. I've gone around and tried to shed light on what's going on out there. I mean, you folks probably see me out there on social media, and I'm somewhere every day making sure that the word is out there about what's going on. I want to bring attention to this. So the bottom line is, what am I doing? Everything I possibly can every single day to ensure that we're getting the word out, whether it's highlighting the good things or pushing back against the bad things, and that comes in a number of forms. Legislation is just one thing. It's being an advocate and pushing back against bad regulations, against bad policy, and ultimately against just bad ideas. We will continue to do that, and that's something that I do every day, and I'm proud to do it for you as your representative.
And why is it that a non-medical facility is allowed to require vaccines for its employees when they are not medically certified in any area, and allowed to fire non-medical staff if not vaccinated?
And that's, unfortunately, that has been held up by federal court, that the businesses can require the vaccine. I don't think it's right. But it has been held up by a federal court. Now, it hasn't gone to the Supreme Court, and that is ultimately where it's going to have to be decided. I think that's the one. When it comes to federal court appointees, you've got the Ninth Circuit that's liberal, and then you can go through the list, right? You're playing a crapshoot as whether or not you're going to get a liberal judge or a conservative judge. But when you go to the Supreme Court, you've got probably the best chance you have of really getting a true analysis of is it constitutional or not. And unfortunately, we're going to have to wait till then to find out.
And what's being done to prevent vaccine passports from being implemented?
Well, they did roll out the vaccine passport in New York State, and they got a lot of pushback, and they kind of quietly rolled that back. Look at folks. I don't think that's a right. If you want to show someone your vaccine card, that's up to you. If you don't, you don't. And the whole idea of mandating some kind of an app, I mean, this is just, it's amazing too. You look at this, how we've kind of quickly rolled into, what George Orwell talked about in 1984, right? And, we were supposed to, as conservatives, take that as a cautionary tale. The liberals have taken that as an instruction manual.
Do you foresee Kathy Hulkel introducing more emergencies measures, and if so, how are we going to stop her?
Well, this goes back to the whole idea, and the answer is yes, I think she will. I think this goes back to the whole idea that we need to have separation of power. We need to have checks and balances, and the legislature needs to stand up. As I said before, they're very comfortable letting her do all the dirty work, just like they were letting Andrew Cuomo do the dirty work before that, because they don't have to make any decisions. They don't have to. They can just say, "Look, that's within her purview. That's within her power." They would love for her to declare another state of emergency and be able to just wash their hands of taking responsibility for things. So the answer is, don't let that happen. You have to push back as much as possible with as many people as possible saying, no, we need to have a balance of power. And if you think something's right, you need to go down, put a bill forth, debate it, and you stand up and vote yes or no on that bill. Don't let somebody else do your dirty work. Don't be a coward. Be the legislator that you were elected to be.
How is it not discrimination to have the unvaccinated have to submit for COVID testing for events and not the vaccinated, as the vaccinated can catch and spread the virus?
Yeah, and there is no fairness to that, so I don't have an answer to that. There is no fairness to that. The bottom line is they want to coerce as many people as possible into getting the vaccine. And that's, again, it's not about compassion. It's not about public health. It's about control.
And then follow-up, how is it not discrimination to have a school child who was in close contact with a COVID-positive individual have to quarantine, while a vaccinated individual does not have to quarantine? Both can catch and spread it.
Well, I'm not up on the latest regulation du jour, but the last I knew, if you are, whether you're vaccinated or not, if you are, if you are tested positive, you have to quarantine. It's just slightly, I think it's like 5 days versus 7 days, but I'm not sure the details on that. But as far as I know, if you do test positive, even if you're vaccinated, because you have the quote-unquote breakthrough cases, and the breakthrough cases are people that have had the vaccine and have still tested positive. So I believe they still have to quarantine. It's just like a couple days shorter.
I think we're right down to the last two questions or so.
I didn't see these.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, okay. Quickly go through these. If all reps from police to president swear an oath to the Constitution, then why are there so many unconstitutional laws on the books when under Marbury versus Madison, it costs me time and money to enact or to exercise my constitutional rights?
Yeah. Well, folks, it's all about there is no automatic process. These things have to be challenged in court, and they ultimately have to go. We have three branches of government. In state government and federal government, of course, you all know it's the executive, legislative, and judicial. And the bottom line is the judicial branch has to be our last stopgap for these things, because the legislative branch will certainly try to do what it can to circumvent whatever it is, whether it's their constitution or their oath, and the executive branch, same thing. We have to rely on that judicial branch to pull them back and say, no, this is fundamentally wrong. So there is no automatic process. That's the problem, and ultimately, this is why people said to me, why did you sue? Why? Because that's the process. That's the only way you're going to stop it, is to get it in front of a judge. It's like we've got one party rule in Albany, and without that lawsuit, there's no stopping it, because there's no resistance, there's no firewall.
Okay, since vaccinated people can still spread the virus, why aren't they losing their jobs? Would you please ask P.J. Wendell and company this question. By what logic can anyone justify this sort of decision?
Well, I don't think it's PJ's decision on that. I mean, ultimately, this goes back to our state and federal government that, again, they're trying to coerce people into doing this. They have this feeling that somehow, if everybody's vaccinated, that's going to change things, but clearly we see that hasn't been the case. But ultimately, this is about the constitutionality of it. That's the bottom line. This is not constitutional, folks. You know, it's frustrating too because, interestingly enough, liberals 20, 30 years ago used to be all about this, right? They used to be all about free speech. They used to be all about, my body, my choice. Yeah, all these things that they said that were more important than politics was to preserve our constitutional rights. They're all about the First Amendment. They don't like the Second Amendment. They never have. But they're all about the Constitution. Then all of a sudden, when they have complete control, we can just toss the Constitution out. That's the problem. We have to get back to that. We can't sit here and argue semantics. We can't argue their logic, because that's never going to work. It's simple. This is the Constitution. It's not negotiable.
I think we have time for two more quick ones here. The Chautauqua County Board of Health appears to be unanimously supporting Governor Hulkel's mandates, mask testing mandates. Is it time we question the person responsible for these appointees, our County Executive P.J. Wendell, to select a more balanced membership in determining what is best for our community?
Well, again, the Department of Health, the County Department of Health is certainly has to still abide by those state and federal mandates. But ultimately, look at, questioning your leadership, questioning your elected officials. That's the whole point of this process. Is that if you're not happy with it, then you just speak up. Ultimately, and I know a lot of folks were at the last county legislature meeting, but county government, again, is at the tip of the spear. I will tell you that because I was in county government for 10 years. And ultimately, there is a very tight box that they have to operate within. And I'm not making excuses. I'm just telling you because I know that's the reality. Change at the state and federal level is where the substantive change will occur.
And I know this is a federal question, but still it was asked. Why were 20,000 plus U.S. citizens still in Afghanistan?
Because our president screwed up. That's why. That's ultimately why. There's no other way to slice that, right? He had this political goal that he wanted to be out of Afghanistan before 9/11, and it didn't matter what the experts told him. It didn't matter what anyone else said. He wanted to achieve that political goal, and that's the problem, right? That's too much of what goes on in our state and federal government. It's all about meeting political goals instead of what's doing in the best interest of the people. It's politics over good policy.
Was it incompetent or was it intentional?
Yeah, that's the question, right?
I think it's incompetent all around.
I think,
it's intentional.
The bottom line is that he'd been in government long enough to know that was a bad decision. So either he was getting bad advice or he felt that politics was more important than the lives of the people he left behind. Yeah, absolutely. No, there's
evacuate that base.
Absolutely, it was, and the whole idea. Again, we're not. None of us are military experts here, as far as I know. And the whole idea of trying to crowd everybody into one, into one airport instead of decentralizing it. But again, there's not. It's bad politics over good policy. That's really what it comes down to.
All right. Great.
One question for George, but one housekeeping thing. We are getting so many people here now to the meetings. When you start to come here and park, if you could start parking at the back, so because we lost our back tonight because of front row parking. So if you can come in and start parking at the way back of the lot first, that would help us get more cars in easily. And then if people who are mobility or handicapped, they can park in the front. Because we're parked all the way down to Norby Road, and we got people in the field. So that would help us out. So if you can park at the back first and kind of move forward. Quick question. I went to the DMV in Jamestown today. Mm-hmm. What was the most important question when I was signing? Do you want to sign up to vote?
Yes, the motor voter.
Not asking me if I was illegal or not.
Yeah, no. Yeah. So, well, all right. I don't want to leave on a negative note, but I will tell you. This has been, this is something that's really this year especially. So they have this new policy where you're automatically registered to vote if you get a driver's license, and they went to pick and choose certain areas where people are automatically registered to vote. If you're receiving government benefits of some kind, or if you're getting your license, not if you're going to get your pistol permit, or if you're going to pay your taxes. I mean, those are the, so when you go to pay your property taxes, are we automatically registered to vote? No, you're not. Only if you're somehow on the receiving end of something from government instead of on the paying end. So that's a problem, number one. So if you're going to do it everywhere, right? Not just select certain areas where certain people are going to be more grateful to certain people. And the second thing, and this is the part that was really bothersome. So now, if you are not eligible to vote in New York State because you're not a resident, you have to opt out of being automatically registered to vote. Okay? Now wait, it gets worse. They actually decriminalized not opting out. It used to be if you didn't opt out, that was a crime. They took that away. Because we don't want someone who accidentally didn't register to vote, or registered to vote and didn't opt out to be somehow liable. Well, then don't make it automatic instead of decriminalizing it. But again, this is the policy, right? This is what they want to do. There are significant groups of people, elected officials in New York State, that believe that people who aren't residents of New York State should be able to vote here. That's just wrong. I mean, it's just not. It's not. It's just you can come up with every ridiculous argument as to why, but the bottom line is it's wrong. Again, that goes back to what's most important: that people have confidence that our elections are legitimate, and that they are believe in the integrity of our elections, security of our elections. So, yeah. I think you got to have voter ID. I think we got to ensure that that process is legitimate. That's number one. They want to actually make it so that you can register to vote on election day and vote without showing an ID. You can just show up, not register, be registered instantly, and vote that day. Yeah. So that's the process.
In Canada, you have to have two pieces of identification to vote. Your health care card and an independent other thing. 46 out of 47 European nations require ID to vote. Why are we different?
Mexico.
I can't answer that because I don't believe it. Thank you.
Hey, I so appreciate George being here tonight. Appreciate his time.
Thank you very much.
And want to respect. Want to respect your time as well, but last thing, Deanne Nelson has compiled an excellent research handout about COVID vaccines and other items related to that. Those who are on our Tea Party email list will be getting that. It's like 6, 7, 8 pages. Excellent. So you will be receiving that if you're on. Okay, if you're not on the list, see Cheryl right up here. Get on the list, and you will be given that document that Deanne has so excellently produced.
No, thanks again.
Hey, George, thank you so much. All right.
Can I get that email?
Yeah, got the email up here. Yep.